Chapter 66. Jacqueline D'Orsay. Jacqueline D'Orsay naturally wasn't one to be outdone, especially when she had the clear advantage of having a head start ahead of the other houses. She had all the facts and details she needed, and now 1 week later she was more than glad she signed that deal with Thanatos. Honestly, she was glad they were open-minded enough to hear her. They were open to her changes on stories to sound more believable. Further, they even let her make suggestions for Floringale's lines, something going so far as letting her rewrite entire themes of the logic with sound. She did get in contact with the heroes of the story as promised. She got an interview with all of them as well as Floringale, as well as a public interview with Augustana in the future. She was more than happy working with the employees left at her house of songbirds. They were helpful and usually willing to work with most edits. Only a few times did they request for certain information be omitted. Once for talking about the effects of the state-of-the-art weaponry, despite what a huge boon it was. Another time for mentioning Claire not being there for the Grand Coven. Jacqueline wasn't stupid. She came up with a conclusion. She either died in battle, or they weren't willing to reveal how. Or it could be that she did not die. She left the group for other reasons, for reasons they weren't willing to admit. She guessed betrayal, possibly. It mattered not that she entered the new and improved Thanatos complex, a place of healing and impressive security. The upper levels were impressive, but for all the materials they gathered, there had to be a lower level that must have been massive. She'd let them have their privacy. She even had some suggestions for their new ministry project. It was doing some genuine good and excellent for public relations. Isla was perfectly suited to play the role of an angel, healing those in need or whose homes were destroyed. Augustana was up and coming and becoming the role of a leader in some sort. Her popularity in most cases went up, and the songbirds spared no effort in sharing the stories of her being some sort of victory goddess in the paper. Augustana had a fantastic record of winning battles, but it was really noted that her success grew when she was stationed under Darius Orn with Meridus and Scipio. They must have made Darius's job easy. In fact, he more or less admitted that. It was time to meet the witches she was here to see. With a shake of some hands she entered a secure room on the first floor with witches in cages. She was warned before approaching them, "Do not make deals with them. If they attempt to make a deal with you or attempt to hex you in any way, we will bring them to a secure location downstairs." Jacqueline understood, of course, but was surprised at just how human they looked. But then she supposed they were witches rather than hags. She wasn't an expert on the difference. There in the room was a mage keeping the area silenced. "We're going to lower the silence spell. Keep your questions to the point. We have security on standby if they are needed, but they will not escape the cages." Jacqueline was glad of it, and took special note that Darius was one of the security detail behind her, looking directly at the witches. He was sure they would be able to see him from behind. The witches themselves were acting like scared rabbits. Alyssa was the first to have the silence removed. She looked around and swallowed as she decided about how to proceed. "What is this? What is this?" Jacqueline began. "My name is Jacqueline D'Orsay, and I wanted to meet you and ask you about your experiences with the Coven and your account of the details." Alyssa looked around her, and then her face was full of fear. "Let me go! Free me, and I will tell you of their madness. You must look below this place. They are keeping—" Her mouth was silenced. She could not be heard, as she must have screamed warnings in panic. Darius spoke to a few others. "Take her downstairs. We warned her not to attempt to bargain. If you had accepted, there is a chance you might have been magically inclined to free her. We cannot allow that. You may interview the other." Jacqueline kept a straight face as she watched the other one be dragged away in a cage, shouting in a rage hidden behind a spell of silence. Jacqueline had no sympathy for the beast. She would tell a story of how the witch immediately tried to use tricky words to escape, but already knew to leave most of the details out, as was her forte. The silence dropped once again. Abigail looked around, and worry dripped over her entire body. She shook and seemed to be trying not to cry. "I'm Abigail. I am the Witch of Dolls. I am daughter of Isadora, the now slain matron. What is it you wish to know?" This one was much more willing to talk. She talked about her time as a witch, how she was raised. It was all she knew. She heard stories of the Grand Coven, and how she came to be controlled by her mother and Maud. Of course, she was making herself sound more sympathetic than was the actual truth. Still, she supposed her saying it aloud she really had a lot of self-pity. She talked about how she tricked people using her age and the seemingly harmless nature of a child. She admitted to ripping out hearts and adding them to children's dolls in order to make powerful familiars. She even admitted her warnings to her mother, that they should run far away from the Grand Coven found them. She mentioned the weapons, the strategy, and how the witches failed against the humans. She too seemed to leave out the part about Claire, but seemed to like Claire even though it was Claire that bound her mother long enough to be killed by Meredith. She told the story of how she was returned back to town and eventually placed under custody of Xing. Thanatos had been keeping her ever since. She did not speak of what happened, about the horrors she had to watch Alice do to a man. She had done things to people, she had watched witches torture with glee, but this was different. It scared her. Perhaps it was justice that she would have to see such things, but she was afraid of being the one in Alice's chair, that she was the monster that Darius was keeping fed by letting her torture. She dare not speak of Alice, or she would be the one being tortured. Hope fled her. The best she could hope for now was to stay in her cage for a while. So long as she stayed put, it really wasn't much different than before with her mother. She simply traded one cage for another. This one was just more literal. Jacqueline was indeed satisfied. Of course, I think we can agree on a story about this coming up. Glad to be of service as always, to Florengale and her subordinates. Darius nodded. We are glad to have you. If you would excuse us, we have important work ahead of us. Jacqueline fished for more details. Anything juicy you care to share? Darius, of course, had a few things he could say, but gave her very little as always. Not an operation we plan to report. Another man, however, stepped up in Darius's stead, one who worked often with Jacqueline and visited her company. This man was usually far easier to deal with than Darius, and was more than happy to reveal a juicy bit of news to his quill-wielding friend. Thanatos is currently working on a new artificial limb. It's something that might interest you? Jacqueline was interested, true enough. I suppose you want me to leak that to the right channels, preferably to have a few people interested in artificial limbs in mind for their stores? Even better, our prototype is ready for demonstration, just for you. We'd like your opinion on how best to present it. You've proven most helpful. We'd like you to be involved in marketing it, if you're interested. She was, of course. You have a prototype? An artificial limb? How did you do it? Of course he had no intention to reveal everything. A little bit of magic and science. Florengale should be able to explain it better. Right this way, ma'am. Oh yes, they were still pretending Isla was making everything she was supposed to. She was sure she could think up a few lines for Florengale if the time came. She was led into a sitting room of sorts, and there were many books and refreshments. After a small bit of waiting, Florengale entered the room with a very tired but very proud jackal in a chair. May I introduce one of the witchblades? Sven and his brother-in-arms Kensen will also be visiting us. It was not an interview, but she had to applaud the tricky nature of tricking hunters into being in the same room as one of the songbirds. The witchblades were secretive and would not willingly meet her in most cases. However, this was a situation where they were going to see how Sven was feeling after his new arm. He looked tired and worn. He looked like he had gone through a great deal of pain. While Jacqueline had many questions, she stayed quiet as he met his friend for the first time in a while. How are you doing? Kensen asked. Sven looked to Kensen and managed very slowly to raise his artificial arm. It's different, but it will work. I am clumsy with it, but it does move. Things we take for granted like feelings are missing. There was pain, Kensen, but it is over at last. Many would have assumed the pain was from the surgery on the arm or the artificial limb connecting to the nerves. Kensen knew well that such things Sven could not complain about. He would not even mention it. He was a strong warrior and would not complain of the surgical treatment, but his spirit seemed to be torn, and some parts of his body seemed harmed despite the fact that the arm should have been there when the actual work should be done. Did some sort of enemy hurt him in his sleep? Strange. Kensen looked over the limb. It was strong. It was elegant even. Whoever made it was a genius. They were able to make this, yes? This was done quickly. I've never seen anything like it. Sven nodded. Yes, and because of what I went through, it will be easier for others. There had to be multiple attempts on connecting the nerves and other pains, but we will have limbs for many who have lost them. Kensen smiled at him behind his face cloth. You did a lot, but I ask you this, would you want to do more? There is a chance of finishing what we started. Sven grunted and started to raise himself from a chair. He stumbled and said, I will need to train, but let us see what I am capable of. Jacqueline finally stepped in and hoped for a question. Excuse me, are you both the witchblades that helped with the coven attack? Both of them got defensive. They were, but did not answer. She needed to ask a better question, one that might get a reaction. "We thank you for your services. I was wondering if the Witchblades were hoping to expand in Quillen considering the size of the Grand Coven. You've drawn a lot of attention to it. Maybe something can be done." They looked to each other, and Kenson answered, "Who are you?" They were defensive, weren't they? "My name is Jacqueline, and I'm a friend of Darius. He told me to come here and observe the arm. I'm a writer, but of course I can keep our meeting private. I was just curious about the Witchblades as well as the arm." Sven supposed telling her about the arm was no trouble. "I was injured during the battle with the Witch of Void. The arm itself was made in 2 days, but the testing took longer. It is a prototype, one that was difficult to attach to nerves. It is a combination of science and magic. I've never seen anything like it." She was interested. "Curious. It seems so simple looking. Will it take training to use it as well as another hand?" Sven honestly said, "I would not drink with it, nor is it worthy of doing anything delicate. Even grabbing a cup might be problematic. But I will need to learn to use it. We take for granted how difficult our hands are to use. It is not as flexible as a true hand, nor should it be expected to be. But I will learn to use it. It can still be used to hold a weapon or open a door." Kenson eyed her. "As for the Witchblades, it's safe to say I doubt they'll be expanding. With the returning militaries now turning their focus to bandits and other occult groups, it's unlikely we Witchblades will be much in demand. Even with the Grand Coven, doubt they will be a threat anyone is willing to face any time soon, yes? We must prepare for when we have to fight the Coven or any other kind of cults. There are many threats, but I doubt the Witchblades will grow in number." Jacqueline thought that was odd, but wasn't pressing her luck. "Is there a chance you'll work with the forces of Xing again?" Kenson answered, "If we are called, then yes. Xing has proven to be very kind to the Witchblades. Your Florengale offered to help get Sven his arm back. I was most grateful. Please write of it. We are in her debt." Sven and Kenson both knew it was not Florengale who arranged this, but the wishes of an old friend were honored. He did not want credit, and such all credit would go to Florengale. But that was fine. Jacqueline asked a pointed question, but she managed to do so in a way where they might answer. "Other witch hunters were coming to Xing. I was hoping perhaps they were going to receive recognition for their part in this battle." They looked to each other, and Kenson nodded. "Yes, they are visiting and thanking the 12 houses soon, as well hearing about other possible jobs in the future. We shall see what they bring up. Nothing concrete." They could not tell her about the operation Darius was planning, an operation which was gathering elves, men, and hunters. The Sun Court and Moon Court were already gathering, and Darius had been producing black blades over the month. It would soon be time. The Witchblades gathered to redeem themselves. They sought to face the very strongest of witches, the goddess herself. But this was not for a paper to know. This needed to be done in secret. Everything was being prepared. Hopefully she would be deep in meditation and unaware of their actions. But the time would come where they would have to face her. It was almost time.